Hello and welcome to today's Partner Web Conference. This is Fast Track Dynamics 365 for Finance and Operations Enterprise Edition Tech Talk. Today's topic, how to extend or build new analytical workspaces. Presenting for us today from Microsoft, we have Senior Program Manager, TJ Vassar. So without any further delay, TJ, over to you.
Thank you, Janice, and thanks for everyone joining us today. It's a pleasure of mine to be able to showcase this information with our customers and partners. So today we're talking about extending analytical workspaces in Dynamics 365 for operations. So we've got about an hour. I've got quite a bit of content to share with you guys. Really excited about this. We're really excited about the investments we're making here and the innovations that's surfacing in this area. Today I'll focus specifically on just giving you some background. What are workspaces and what have we done to extend workspaces in the application? Next I'll just go into telling you the story of our Power BI service integration and what it does to bolster the D365 for operations offering. I'll also show you some demos of the application. I'll use our latest release that came out, application release. And that came in July of this summer. It's our App 7.2 release, which includes several standard analytical workspaces and reports. So we'll showcase just a few of those. Then I'll jump into the developer experience. How do you go about extending the app to include custom solutions? Either extending some of the out-of-box standard reports or creating reports of your own. And I'll try to do my best to save some time for some questions. By all means, if you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to post those. I have my partner in crime, Melinda Betharna, who is also on the call to help assist with any questions that come up during the session. Cool. So let's keep going and get started. So yeah, first thing, it's just really important for us to hammer home the purpose of workspaces. I don't want to take for granted folks' familiarity with D365 for operations. It's quite a new experience if you're accustomed to legacy ERP systems, AX 2012, or just some of our competitors. But I'll speak assuming that you have some exposure to Dynamics, and we'll just fill in the gaps where we can. But if you're familiar with Dynamics AX 2012, you'll recall we released a bunch of I guess, area-focused, role-tailored solutions, and they were shipped as role centers. Now, these were web-based. They were built on SharePoint technology, but they were really innovative, and they allowed us to create experiences that were targeted for specific roles in an organization. And with D365 for operations, we've taken that concept to the next level. First of all, we built a completely new interface, HTML5 based interface that's not based on SharePoint any longer. This gives us a few wins right off the bat. We're compliant on most devices, iPads, Android devices. So the experience you see today on a PC carries over to your mobile devices as well and tablets. So that was a huge win right off the bat. But we didn't want to lose track of the direction we were taking the product and delivering specific experiences for users of the app. We didn't want just cookie cutter experiences that carried forward for everyone. We wanted them to be different for if you were a sales clerk versus a sales manager or a sales representative. What you needed and what you needed, how you took action in the application varied. So we built specific views for roles for different industries in the application. These are very purpose-built. They're defined up front. They're designed and implemented by a developer. They're baked into the metadata, and they're used to really surface frequently used tools throughout the application. Basically, we want this to be the landing place for people to use to figure out what they're going to be doing throughout the day. Action-driven. You come in here, you find out your data, and you're able to immediately take action. I'll show you a little bit more about what I mean here, but I just want these words, these intents to stand out, that these are the point of workspaces. Traditionally, we've provided these out-of-box developer-authored experiences, and we're coining these as operational workspaces. These are where you go to actually do your daily activities. So as mentioned before, workspaces are extremely targeted. They're designed to work specifically for a role in an organization, in a particular organization for that matter. But they're extensible to the extent that you can actually personalize them and bring in views from other workspaces into the workspace that you spend the majority of your time. But out of the box standard that shipping with D365 for operations, we have over 55 standard application workspaces. So it's very likely that there will be a workspace out of box that's geared towards whatever area of the application you find yourself involved in. Excellent. So that's pretty much just a flashback into what D365 for Operations offers in terms of workspaces up until the 7.2 release in July of this year. Now what we've done is we've actually taken the concept of a role-tailored experience to the next level. Not only do we want to bake in developer metadata-driven experiences, we want to give end users the power to really define what it means to have analytics into their data. So that's where we bring in Power BI. So I'm much more familiar with having these courses interactive so I can sort of engage with people in the audience to find out your experience. But I'm going to assume that most people have at least heard of Power BI. It's a brand new service that's really taken the market by storm. It's Microsoft's story for creating analytical insights. It's allowing you to bring in your data from any data source, build models, build relationships with your data, and present it that's in the most consumable fashion appropriate for the data, and then take it even further and actually share it with others in your organization. So when we say Power BI, we view that as a platform. It's a set of tools that you use to build visualization experiences around data. So this slide is just a good sort of gives you some insight into what we mean by data and actions and sort of the places where you can actually take advantage of these visualizations. So data can come from a number of different places. It comes from the cloud, it comes from user activity, just IoT inputs. If you think of the cloud, there's just data coming in all over the place. The trick is managing that data and exposing it to the people that can actually make sense of it and use it to their benefit. And that's really where Power BI comes in. It ships with hundreds of data connectors, allowing you to reach the data where it exists today. You don't have to pull it or move it or transform it into any shape so that you can actually take advantage of this tooling. So that's really the Power BI play for Microsoft. It's the company's solution for allowing you to draw data from disparate data sources and bring it together to produce a unified visualization story with that data. And so what we've done with Dynamics 365 is we've taken advantage of the service and actually brought it into the app and said, okay, well, we were a great operational platform, and we have a rich collection of business data and customer data and just data that's interesting to users of our service. How can we use Power BI to bring both of those worlds together? So that's what I'll show you today is sort of what we've done to integrate this service into the platform. So there's a seamless experience between acting on your data and getting insights into your data. So as mentioned before, where traditionally we've provided people with operational views, things that you can use to take action, very predefined, metadata-driven, predefined to target the things we know are most interesting to you as a specific role in an organization. Those are operational views. We'll showcase those a bit. But I just want to contrast that to the new experience, and this is just one of the ways in which we've integrated the Power BI service, is in addition to operational views, we're now also offering you analytical views. So not only do you get an all-up view of data in terms of how to interact, create, delete, take action on it, but also how to analyze your data. So we have a team of experts here at Microsoft that has gone through the effort, through the challenge of basically building reportable views off of your business data and providing you with some default visualizations of that data to really give you some insights, some additional insights, and basically augment your understanding of your business activities. So these are supposed to be, drop dead simple. These analytical views should not take training in order to consume. These are absolutely intended for everyone in the organization. So one of the huge goals for us is democratizing BI. Where before it was really just dedicated to the people who are sort of at the higher levels of a company. We'd now like to share BI, share analytics with everyone in an organization, because the more informed your organization is, the better decisions they're going to make throughout. And that's really one of the big wins with analytical views. Is doesn't require training, doesn't require expertise, but it's intuitive enough for anyone in your organization to benefit from. One of the things you'll notice with the analytical views is they begin to take the place of what we used to do with SSRS reports. Traditionally, we would have all of our insights delivered through reports. Now, reports quite basically were documents that were rendered off your data. You would come in, you would give some parameters, say, hey, I'm kind of looking for something in this area, run, and we'd give you a static view of that information. We've come a long way since then. Instead of having you predefine your boundaries and run static views, we allow you to play with the data so you can sort of find your way down to the information that you're actually after. Again, so I'll show you some demos of this, of just sort of the interactive experience working with operational views, and then we'll contrast that with interacting with an analytical view, and we'll see what the differences are. So in addition to the 50 plus operational workspaces that release with the app, we also have a total of 18 analytical workspaces that are embedded in the standard D365 for operations offering. Now this number is 18 at today, but I believe over the next few weeks this number will increase. Just to give you some sort of heads up that we are absolutely continuing to invest in this. We've gotten great feedback from customers and partners in this technology and how it's really bolstered their ability to be productive in providing analytical services to their customers. So this is what we have with the 7.2 release, although this portfolio is rapidly growing as we expand analytical workspaces to cover more areas of the app. We're also getting a lot of uptake by partners who are effectively producing analytical solutions of their own based on this technology and delivering them through AppSource. Now I probably won't have time to jump into custom solutions, but you'll definitely want to check out AppSource to keep an eye on new analytical solutions as they become available to you. Let's see. All right. All right, without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at some experiences available in the application. So I'm going to bring up just a recent build. This is, again, the 7.2 release that we have just sort of built up some data around. I use this to sort of showcase the experience you can expect to see with your data. All right, so the first place you're going to encounter is the landing page. This is effectively our dashboard. I look at this as a hub. These are as a launch pad into specific areas of the application. You can look at these as individual applications if you'd like to. Although they're built on the same platform, we're all using the same data store. They handle different aspects of an ERP system. So you'll find that some people in an organization may use one of these, others will use several of them. And then there'll be others in the organization that would like to create their own and sort of pull together views to build their own experience because it's that unique. And all of that's possible. So we'll go ahead and look at a couple of different workspaces here. Let's go ahead and jump into the customer credit and collections workspace. So immediately you have a lot of insight into what's going on in terms of your business just by navigating to this workspace. This is the operational view, and there's some structure to these that's worth noting because it's pretty consistent across the applications in D365 for operations. First of all, you'll notice we have this landscape layout here where we kind of use a right scroll to get to the different regions of the workspace. Over here on the left these are really your critical counters or KPIs are another good thing to keep over here. These are basically these are queues, things that require your input or have counters, and they're actionable. I have 0 activities, but I have 9 customers over credit limits. So that's something that's going to draw my attention and lead me to the place where that I can actually start dealing with the data that has created that notification. So again, actionable, right in my face. If I have a number here, I know I have work to do. We go to the side, so I can customize this section. I can add additional counters, and I can define personal KPIs for myself or for my team and share those with others. We've got some sort of nested visualizations here, some charts that are based on sort of aggregated data. Now these are interactive. These are not Power BI. These are our custom controls that we ship with the application that just gives you some really easy ways to sort of group and summarize data. Now you have different pivots you can respond to, and it's going to give you different views of this information. Again, these are very interactive, tied to the form data source. Excuse me. So as information, as filters are applied to this page, they also impact these views as well. So you'll notice I have a Power BI button here. I'm going to come back to that. Let's park that for a minute. You've got another section here that's very customary, and these are basically these are lists. These are advanced grids that are actionable as well. So these are slices or views of the data, and I can have a great deal of data here. This is the legacy grid experience, just surfaced in a way that's really easy to navigate. And accessible from a mobile device. So it's just a friendly grid. But again, you can click on these actionable. And then on the far right, you're going to find usually frequent links, other areas of the product that you frequently access or that make sense. We've also got links to our standard SSRS reports here. So for those people who may be accustomed to the old SSRS method of accessing their data, it's still available. We didn't take that away, but what we did was we've extended the experience by saying, you know what, this is great. This helps me react. But what was missing from this was my ability to sort of anticipate a problem, and give me enough insight into my data so that I can potentially find trends that others aren't familiar enough with the workload to find on their own. That was missing here. So what we did was we said, okay, well let's bring in the power of Power BI and enrich it with the data and metadata awareness we have in the application to give you a unified experience in the app. So I'll click here. So we're on operational view. And just with a click of a button, you can go from that operational, hey, I know what I'm going to work on, sort of task-driven view, to more of an ad hoc, self-servicing view, one that allows me to interact with the data in a way that's meaningful to me. So we'll let that render. And right away, we're brought up with a really rich interactive report that's surfacing information that's relevant to me. Now these are very highly interactive visuals. They don't just, change the control I'm working on. They actually affect the entire view of the report. So I can come over here and slice on some different slices of data and just focus on those values that comprise that segment of my data. So these are just how I can sort of use the reports to interactively filter my report. And as you'll notice, I've got different views here that are targeted for sort of different purposes. So if I'm interested in seeing, where's my credit, where's my credit outstanding? There's a view specifically for here. Customers with credit limits who are over. Again, these are just really nifty ways of playing with the data, getting some visuals, and just by looking at this tells me that hey, Nevada seems to be one of our sore spots for customers over their credit limits. I hope they're not all over gambling or anything, but this just tells me a lot about my data. And you have to imagine there are gigabytes of data feeding into this transactional database that's creating this analytical view of my customers. Again, so age balances, this where before was an SSRS report where you had to run it several times to get to the groups you're after. I don't really have to do that here. I can literally click on these links and get down to the details that I'm after. So these visuals, although they give you just the ability to see the raw numbers behind them, so any visual in the app can show you, hey, this is a breakdown across these companies, and here are the balances that were used to produce this visual. And sometimes that's enough, but other times you'll find that, the details are really important to me, and it's not just the numbers, but it's the records in the database, the transactional records or objects that have produced these aggregates that are important. And through the integration of the service, we've actually enabled you to not only have these high-level views, but find a slice of data that's interesting, and using the visuals to navigate the application. So just like all of the charting controls you saw in the operational workspace, I can use controls that are in my analytical workspace to also navigate down to detail records in the app. So now I'm at the point where I have really alert-driven or notification-driven objects and operational views to take action. Once I get through those, I can come back to these analytical views and sort of do a little bit more anticipation of what may pop off, what may bubble to the top tomorrow for me. So great experience. Again, these are delivered with the application, and they're built into models themselves. And at this point, I guess I'll jump into a little bit more about what's happening behind the scenes here. Let's do this. Okay. So that's just a quick, 5-minute overview of sort of what the end user experience is dealing with these analytical workspaces. Like I said, there's no training necessary. They're embedded in the application to be effectively where people would need them to be. So this is not something that you would need to prepare an industry to learn how to use. This is more of a tool that people will take advantage of and learn to use as they start to tinker around with the Power BI tool. So a lot of times people see that and it starts to bring up a lot of questions. Okay, well, I see the service. I'm familiar with PowerBI.com. I recognize the sort of the sensitivity of my data. How do I reconcile those three? So I like to bring this picture together so I can kind of show you how data flows, where we're sourcing the data, where these views reside, and we can talk a little bit about how we're securing the data throughout. So this is just a view, a real simplified, I guess, visual on the relationship between Power BI, our transactional DB, and what we have in between them. And you'll notice this box over on the right-hand corner there's called an entity store, and all arrows are pointing towards it. Now, the entity store is, for the most part, I guess in simple terms, it's the reportable view of your transactional DB. This is a model that is derived from your transactional DB schema and metadata settings in the application. So I'll show you that in a bit, but effectively, how your objects in the transactional DB, you're going to want to relate those in such a way so that they're easy to report. And that is the model that's exposed in the entity store. Those models are then used as the data sets to source our Power BI reports, our analytical reports. So, and I'll show you this in a bit. Effectively, you're going to use the Visual Studio tools, the tooling provided with D365 for Operation, to define models. And our construct for model definitions are called aggregate measurements. I'll show you that in a minute. Those effectively describe the makeup of the data. So you're going to normalize effectively those transactional DB, the schema, in a way that's really meaningful for reporting. That is then surfaced in the entity store. We have a bunch of engines in the background that ensure that that entity store is kept in sync with the transactional DB. And all the reports are sourced off of the entity store. Now this helps us in a number of ways. Most importantly is it ensures that none of the reporting experiences, none of the report operations have the opportunity to degrade the transactional DB. We would hate to have an experience where, you've got all these people get excited about the reporting tools. Monday morning, everyone comes in, there's a new version of the app, and then somehow, because everyone's reporting at the same time, you're unable to post an invoice. That's a nightmare circumstance that we guarantee we avoid with this infrastructure, with this architecture. First and foremost, invoices, your interactive, the operational workspaces are all going against that transactional DB. So whatever number of reporting scenarios or sessions you have active, or even users, has no bearing on the interactions with the transactional DB. So that's it might be a subtle point, but it's something that architects and IT managers feel much more encouraged to hear that up front, right off the bat. You don't have to worry about this scaling the service to avoid interfering with the transactional interactive scenarios. The other thing it allows us to do is that entity store has metadata awareness about the objects in the transactional DB. So we're able to keep some insight about the objects visualized in the Power BI reports. So things like drilling down from a report visual into an AX form become possible. We're also able to manage the refresh frequency between the transactional DB and entity store. And I'll speak a little bit more about where we're headed there. Today, it's still a scheduled operation. Your system admin will pretty much define a frequency at which they'd like the updates to occur. But we're doing things like incremental refreshes, an investment we're working hard on to ensure that the entity store is as close as possible of a reflection of the transactional DB. Now at this point, it's as fresh as the latest update. However, we're bringing the frequency of updates down, as well as the payload for those updates, so that they can occur much more frequently. At some point very soon, you'll notice near real-time information being available in the entity store. So that's sort of how data flows. The data sets themselves, as you define as a developer using Power BI Desktop. So I'll show you this in a bit, but effectively you connect to the entity store. you define a relationship between entities, and that is the data set, and it resides in that PBIX file. And cool. Then on top of that, in Power BI Desktop, you build your visuals, and that's when you can bring it back into the app to share with others. So yeah, just to be transparent here, there is an on-premise offering that we just came out with also in July of this year. Although we're continuing to make investments there, I just wanted to call attention to this is the current state of things. Although we're working hard to bring parity to our on-prem release so that it's able to support cloud and some of the analytical features that we're exposing in our cloud release, our cloud offering as well. So today, you do not have access to analytical reports in the on-prem version. It's something that we're working really hard to light up here in the future. You also don't have the ability to pin Power BI content. I'll have to come back to that. I didn't show you that, but I'm going to come back and show you that. And some of our services, some of our predictive analytics that are dependent upon Cortana Analytics, we're going to have some issues. I think we won't be able to provide as much cloud analytics in our on-prem release. But that's just the nature of the beast. We depend on our cloud infrastructure to power much of those predictive engines. But you get all the rest of the reporting engines that are standard in the application to ensure you have full functionality with our on-premise release, our on-premise offering. Yeah, another important thing to understand is licensing. What is the license constraints, requirements around this service? And we'll be happy to inform you that the license to access the Analytical Workspaces is bundled with the D365 for Operations package. So all users of the D365 for Operations client will have access to Analytical Workspaces. It's just a bundled deal. You don't have to get an additional license to author the reports. So this is specifically to speaking to the embedded experiences. The developer experience is entirely in Power BI Desktop. So you don't require a pro license or anything to stitch together those embedded experiences. They're sourced from D365 data. They're built locally on one box, and I'll show you that here in a second. Where you will need a PowerBI.com license is if you plan to actually build experiences on PowerBI.com, if that involves D365 data. So, for instance, if you wanted to go out to PowerBI.com and source some views from D365 and perhaps do a data mashup with data from some external or on-premise data source, in that scenario, you would want to go to PowerBI.com to define those views, and accessing D365 for Operations in that scenario would require a pro license. Doing so gives you the ability to then share those views, those solutions, with others in the organization. It also gives you the ability to author reports and take advantage of some pro functions. You can author, you can secure those reports, etc. All right. Before I go, what's next? I wanted to bring you back. And so that's a really quick look at the embedded experience, just from an end user's perspective. I also wanted to quickly showcase some ways that you can take advantage of solutions that have perhaps been hosted on PowerBI.com. So we'll come back and use where before you had this analytics tab. That's an embedded solution that comes with the app. I also have the ability to, through personalizations, bring in some Power BI content that perhaps has been shared with me in my organization, or that I've created on my own out on PowerBI.com. And by the way, if you haven't had a chance to test drive powerbi.com. If you haven't gone out to the site, just to give it, a half an hour once over, I highly recommend you do that. A lot of these concepts may seem foreign because Power BI has really elevated our ability to do more with analytics. So I apologize. My images are not showing off right now. I'm on a Microsoft domain account, so I have some limits on what I've kind of overdone it. I've shown this too many times. But what we allow you to do here is you can effectively pin tiles that are exposed to you on workspaces on powerbi.com. Let's not show that. Let's come back to this. Apologies. Again, I'm working through. It's not always great to be on the Microsoft domain. Sometimes you have some restrictions that prevent you from doing things. But what I can show you is that I can also get to not just the tiles that are exposed to me, but also any of the reports that I have out on powerbi.com. So I've got a boatload of reports that, some show D365 data, some show traffic data, others show customer performance or perhaps opportunities. Again, these are all solutions that are hosted on powerbi.com. So I can select one or any number of these. Actually embed those links into my workspace and interact with these reports without leaving the D365 shell. Again, these reports, I don't necessarily have to be a pro user to have access to these reports. They could have been authored by a pro user and shared with me. But because I have access to them, because they've been shared with me as an individual, I can bring that experience into D365 for Operations and take advantage of this level of insight. So this is really cool. We view this as a personalization because everyone is going to have their own sense of which reports or what views are most relevant to them. So that's a little bit of how we've integrated the PowerBI.com service. So before I get into what's next, I guess I can show you just a little bit about the experience in actually, okay, so we've seen what we've given you out of the box. We've kind of shown you some different flavors of the service integration. Now I want to just quickly speak to any of the engineers out there that are interested in just, hey, how do I become productive? How can I add value to this using this new tooling? So I'll quickly jump into, this is a one-box environment. It's been deployed, provisioned on LCS. Yeah, so this is where I would go as a developer if I either have a Power BI file or a PBIX file that someone has authored or someone has requested that I create one. This is where I would start. In some cases, you'll need to, if you have your own, your own data sets, your own custom data sets, you would need to define models of your own or extend some out-of-box models to reference the data that you're bringing into D365 for Operations. So the first stage of developer experience is getting access to the data. So I'm going to quickly let's go to Classic View. Now, if you come under here, under Analytics, you'll see a node called Aggregate Measurements. And for those that are familiar with AX 2012, you could sort of start with the image of what cubes were. Cubes were your own sort of semantic model of the AX transactional data. And to be honest, for those of you who are coming from AX 2012, we actually upgrade your cubes and convert them into aggregate measurements just to help you in the transition process. So if you've defined a cube, it's very likely that after your code migration, it's going to show up here as in this collection. And it'll be marked, let's see if I think we still have retail. So I can't find one. There are some in here I know that were brought forward. Oh, here's one. We have a TAM cube, and you'll see that the usage over here is still flagged as SSAS cube. Now, for those of you who are upgrading solutions, what you're going to want to do is change the property of your usage, turn it into a staged entity store usage, and go ahead and compile your cube at that point. Now, what's going to happen is the metadata validation engine is going to go through and just make sure we have all the details we need in the cube. There are some cases where cubes were referencing external data or included indexes that we can't support in the new model. And in all those cases, we'll just warn you. We'll pop up a warning and we'll say, hey, we need you to fix this relationship definition before we can proceed. But once you've gone through all of those code cleanup, you effectively have defined a semantic model that you can start to build reports off of. And by actually defining an aggregate measurement or turning a cube into an aggregate measurement that's valid, you are effectively altering the entity store schema. In a sense, you're defining new objects, new reportable objects that will be now exposed in the entity schema. So let's go ahead and look at a simple one. Add this to my project. So fleet's always an easy one to start with. If we went ahead and look at this cube, I'm sorry, this aggregate measurement, we'll see it's got attributes. This doesn't have any attributes. But this one does have measures and dimensions. These are the measurable columns by the things they can be sliced by. So any BI developers out there should be quite familiar with these constructs. We've essentially tried to model the tooling in such a way that it made sense to people that had dealt with three-dimensional views and SQL Management Studio. So this is the tool to model the views that will then be exposed in the entity store. So you could imagine that if I came in here and I extended this, I made a copy and put it into my own model, gave it a unique name, built and compiled that, I could then come over to SQL Management Studio on that machine, look in this database that's called AXDW, and under these views, you'll start to see those views materialize. So really quickly, what is this? Why is this happening? So you'll recall if we go back to this display here, all of our transaction data flows into the entity store, and then all the models defined in Power BI reports source their data from the entity store. So what we just did with this action of defining aggregate measurement and publishing it with the application is we've defined behind the scenes, the platform is going and just creating a bunch of views that are then available for reportable tools like Power BI. So these are the views that were produced from that aggregate measurement definition. And now I can source my reports from this data. So as a developer, your experience is completely tied to a one box. You don't have to go out to Azure SQL. You don't have to produce your own database representation of the entity store. We effectively have a simulation of the entity store that we place directly on your one box. And what's really cool about this is that you literally use that source to build your analytical solutions. So what I've done here is I've jumped on my one box. I've navigated into the packages directory. On some boxes, this is on your J drive. Let's go ahead and start the root. So I believe it's J drive on some boxes, C drive on others, but this is the AOS service. This is the installation of D365 for Operations on the one box. And what it has in here is effectively all of the metadata that's used to build D365 for Operations, including all of the Power BI reports that ship with the product. So I can come in here and actually locate these. I'm going to go into App Suite. If I just really quickly, if I wanted to see fleets, it's the easiest. I would come and find fleets model, and then under the resources, AX resources, another VS content, and there's a Power BI collection. And these are the Power BI reports that are present in the fleets management workspace. I'll go back. I prefer to deal with App Suite ones. They're just a little bit more interesting. So let's go to App Suite version. So I went to Foundation, X Resource, Rehearse Content, Power BI Report. And again, I got a bunch of Power BI reports that shipped with the box, shipped with the product. So let's go ahead and open one of these. And you'll see that what's doing is it's saying, hey, when you launch one of these things, I'm going to launch it with Power BI Desktop. It's a PBIX file. That's the file. This is the app that extension is associated with, and this is what we want to do. Now, don't get too much into how we're accessing the data, but we do use direct query. Maybe if I have time, I'll be able to describe the differences. But let's just continue. So what I have here is I have the Power BI file that was used to produce some of those analytical workspaces in the application. Now, mapping your way back is another, I'll show you how to find your way back from an analytical workspace to the actual Power BI report. But I just want to start here so that I can explain to you sort of what this experience is like. So I'm immediately at the point where I have a model. I have a Power BI file that Microsoft released. They've gone through all of the fun of defining these object relationships for me. Awesome. I want to keep that. Perhaps if I extend the aggregate measurement to include more, I might want to bring in another object and define the relationship. Or I can just come in here and switch visuals or drag and drop additional columns. I can effectively have just a clean canvas that I can use to build the visualization experience that I'm after. We found that developers, although they have traditionally been the authors of the reports, we found that it's really power users who do best with this level of tooling. Developers' responsibility should start and end with Visual Studio. They unlock the data. They identify which columns, which measures, which dimensions are necessary to build those reports. And then they empower power users to go ahead and define those experiences on how they'd like them to be viewed and consumed by actual users of the app. So you can imagine I spend some time in here, I play around with this stuff, I change this from a bar chart to, I don't know, let's change it to let's go to bar charts. Yeah, cool. I like this better. But that's it. That's all I changed. I could have done a lot more, but I didn't. What I'm going to do is just save this as. I'll put it somewhere else on my computer, give it a unique name, and say OK. And at that point, I literally have a PBIX file somewhere on my machine. Let's just, for the sake of argument, say that I called it FM PBI Workspace New. Now I have a visualization definition. I have a model defined. It was authored against my local entity store DB, which is perfect. Now I'm ready to bring it into my metadata collection. So all I need to do is say add new item. This is actually going to be a resource. And I'm going to give it a unique name. PBI Workspace 2. That's an awesome name. And it's going to say, hey, okay, well, where is this resource? Where is this local resource that you're talking about, you're so happy about? I'm going to go find that PBIX file I just saved. And voila, what it does is it's giving me a new resource. So now that PBIX file is part of my model. It's a part of the app. It ships with the app. if you package this and move it up to LCS, this PBIX file is going to be there. When you're ready to deploy this solution to the cloud, to a high availability environment, this PBIX file will go out with it. Now, what will also happen to your benefit is our platform will do some remapping. So instead of pointing these data sets at the local resident entity store, this simulation, it'll remap it to point to the real entity store that's been deployed with your topology. So we take care of mapping the data sources and making sure they're pointed at the right targets. So as a developer, you don't have to worry about where the data is. Build your views, build your experiences around the data that's local to you and available to you. We'll take care of the rest. So now you've got a resource in the app. At this point, you're pretty much good to go. It's represented by metadata now. So you can imagine if I'd like to, let's go ahead and add a menu item. Let's do a display menu item. And it's a display menu item to my FM PBI Workspace 2. I'll give it a better name than that, but that's fine. Let's just do that. Now let's go ahead and open that menu item. And in order for this menu item to be associated with that resource, you just have to do a couple things. And we have some samples here that really make this easy for you to track down. And they're in Fleet. This is documented, but just since you're part of this audience, I can quickly show you. The easiest way to do it is to find another menu item. In this case, it's pointing to a custom controller class, so forgive me. But what you want to do is point your menu item at the base class. The platform comes with a class that will handle launching the report. All it needs is effectively the name of the resource. So you would come in here, you would drop this guy, say, okay, this is a class object. All right. This points to a class. The class is that base class, and the parameter is simply the name of the resource. And that's it. Now at that point, you can embed this menu item into your root nav. You can add it to a form. You can reference it from code, or perhaps you can link to it from some SSRS report. At this point, it's up to you how you want to access that report. So that's for direct links into reports. If you want to embed an analytical solution into a workspace, I highly recommend you take a look at FM Clerk Workspace as a guide. It does the sheer basics here of. So what I did for this solution was I added a tab page that hosts the analytical report. And when you initialize that tab page, I just check to make sure the user has sufficient access to that menu item. And if they do, I'll go ahead and initialize that control. There's a report control that we supply. And all I have to do is give it the name of the resource and a pointer to the group control that you'll actually be plugging into. So the group control is basically the host, this group, in definition, the form definition. And our helper class takes care of the rest. So that's just for basic views, although it's completely extensible. If you want to control the Chrome for workspaces or reports, you can absolutely do that, and we have some documentation on how to take care of that. Beyond that, you can also add handlers so that your code is executed anytime, for instance, someone attempts to click on a visual. You can receive notifications and actually get an opportunity to inspect the context and navigate the user or direct them as appropriate based on that. So those are the two methods of integrating analytics into your app. The first, you can just do a straight menu item navigation, so you can add it to your menus. or you can embed it directly into a form, and we've got some utility functions that make it really easy to do. And again, once you've done that, it's part of your app, it's part of your model, and it will be deployed when your app goes out as well. Sweet. So I got a couple of minutes. I just wanted to quickly touch base on what we have today, but what we're going next is also just as exciting. Those familiar with AX will be happy to hear that we're reimagining the financial reporting experience and offering a modern experience in D365 for operations that's solely geared on taking advantage of the power of Power BI and the analytical tools it affords us. So we're really excited about that opportunity and what that's going to do to the platform. You'll start to see some more predictive analytics built directly into our out-of-box solutions. You can imagine budget forecasts would be a spectacular place, or even retail or customer invoicing. Those places have great opportunities for us to showcase some what-if analytical, some predictive experiences, as well as the opportunity to deploy your own entity store that you can build on top of and somewhat turn into a classic reporting warehouse, data warehouse. This is an opportunity for you to migrate legacy data warehouses. So yeah, we have a lot more coming there. To stay up to date on that, I highly recommend you check out roadmap.dynamics.com to see what's coming, what we're working on. And if you have ideas on where we should be paying attention, we have another site, ideas.dynamics.com/operations, where we'd love to get your feedback. It's direct. It comes to the people that make decisions. It's a really powerful tool for our customers. I got a minute left, so I won't have time to ask questions. So I'll just quickly run through some that I know people will receive. So folks heard you went to this class. They'll ask you these questions. One of them will be, can I customize embedded reports? Absolutely. This is done on a one box. You use Power BI Desktop to build your models against entity store simulation and package it along with the app. Do customers need to purchase a separate Power BI license to use the new embedded analytics? The answer to that is no. You do not need another Power BI Pro license to utilize the embedded analytics. However, if you would like to use PowerBI.com to source data from D365 and do mashups, you would need a Pro license for those types of operations. Can I perform data mashups? Again, yeah, and PowerBI.com is the perfect platform. It's got over 200 data connectors, so you should be able to pull data from wherever it's sourced today. And can I secure data to only those companies have access to? Absolutely. Our out-of-box solutions, for the most part, limit the views to the active company, although you can also create views that provide cross-company views as well. And last thing is I just want to leave you guys with some links to some useful content that will speak to this area, keep you informed. We have a lot of investment in this area, a lot of innovation, and it won't slow down anytime soon. So we'd love to get you tapped in at this point. You're early. You have a chance to shape this technology, and we really appreciate your inputs. And with that, I have used my hour. I absolutely appreciate your attendance here. I hope this was beneficial to you. Please reach out to us for any additional feedback or suggestions you may have on how we can better improve these presentations, as well as documentation that we're providing you so that you can be advocates for the service going forward. So thank you very much for your time.
All right. Thank you, TJ. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to bring your attention to a link that I posted in the messages panel. That's a link to a short survey for this web conference, and we ask that you please take a moment before logging out to access it. We hope that you found today's information helpful, and if you enjoyed today's web conference or have feedback on how we can provide you with a better event, this is your chance to let us know. The survey scores on a scale from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest score possible. And that is going to conclude today's web conference. Attendees may access the web conference recording by the same registration link used to attend today's live broadcast. I'd like to extend a big thank you to our presenter TJ, and thank you, audience, for logging in and joining us today.